Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Refuge Assembly. I'm Pastor Dennis.
And I'm Bobby.
This is Emergency Prepping Wednesday night. This is one of the things that we've been over the past couple of years teaching some things about emergency prep because, as everybody knows, there's a lot of stuff going down in the world, and we want to make sure everybody knows what's going on and is prepared to stay ahead of the curve. Amen?
Amen.
So, tonight we have a very special guest, and that's Cousin Kim.
I'm a country girl if you didn't notice it yet. I speak two languages. One is Southern country, and the other one is English. So you just pick it, whichever one that you can understand the best. Just to let you know, this information that I give you is not all inclusive. It's just enough to get you started or get acclimated back to Cannon, because that times that we're living in now, it just seems like they're a little bit unsteady as far as like a food supply, things like that. So it's just a good idea to just get back in. If it's been a while since you've been into Cannon and food preserving, it's time to get back in. If that you are new, it's not rocket science, it's real easy, and I will try my best to introduce you to some sort of food preservation. The key is to do something. Do one thing every day or one thing every other day, but do something toward food preservation or preservation, just different kinds of supplies that you think that you might need. The supply chain has been disrupted, and I don't know if you need diapers or anything like that, but we've had problems with baby formulas and other things, so it's just a good time to start if you haven't. The theme I want everybody to remember is use what you have. Use what you're comfortable with. If you feel unsafe about pressure canning, it's not a big deal. Get you a water bath can or get you a big stock pot, just anything to start. There's like any kind of stock pot basically people have. I will try to introduce how to do that in an easier way. If you don't have a lot of money to invest, not a problem. I would like to also cover dehydrating today or tonight, whenever, and it may be next week, but we'll just get started on it. So there will be people with different kinds of, some of you may have been canning for years, even before maybe I was born. That's okay. Just use what you have. There's new ways that I would like to introduce. The USDA approval process back in the day was active when that people were canning on a regular basis. But since the canned goods companies came through, started having pinto beans out of a can and beanie weenies and things like that, people just kind of let that run by the wayside, not really being concerned about their food supply because, hey, it always came on a truck. Don't know how it got there, but right there it is. So if you're a canner that's been doing it for years and years, I'm going to be talking about some things that maybe you may not feel comfortable about. It may be not on your comfort level, and that's okay. You do what feels good for you. So if you are an experienced canner, wonderful. You just do what you need to do. But I'm going to tell you some things that may get you a little bit out of your comfort zone. Since that I've been canning the normal standard, what I used to can back in the day, green beans. I always can green beans. Put up sweet corn. Sweet corn goes in the freezer. That's how it worked. Okra, always in the freezer, and then you got it out and you didn't much like it because it was tough. Squash was the same way. So there was a lot of things. Of course, your tomatoes. You always had tomatoes. So if nothing else, I had the prettiest pantry full of tomatoes that ever was and a few green beans over here, and I could always make soup. And the beef that we killed always went in the freezer. No bones about it. So the beef went in the freezer, and then when you got ready for a steak or whatever, or a good old roast, you get it right straight out of the freezer. Now the freezer that I had was probably, this long. It was huge. And, you know, a lot of people had a lot more, but we had beef, pork, just chicken or whatever, and that all went in the freezer. It was meat usually, some vegetables. Well, now we have figured out a way that we can actually do things a little bit different. And like I said, USDA is good, but the USDA has basically been out of the picture as far as like coming up to standards and like doing things, just thinking out of the box. When I ran across, in Facebook, and I ran across something called Rebel Canning. I don't know if you all have ever heard of it, but it's a way of canning that's not according to USDA standards. And what they basically, the whole idea is your kitchen, your rules. So if you feel like that, you know, you want to follow a recipe on how to can, say for instance, dry canned potatoes, bet you've never heard of that. So basically, I've got some dry canned potatoes sitting on the end, and they're wonderful. What you do is you just take them out of the can, dump them in a skillet in a little grease or whatever that you want to do. You can even, if you want to be healthy, sometimes I'm not healthy, just saying. But if you want to be healthy, you can actually bake the potatoes or air fry them, either one, and they're wonderful, crispy, good, and it's just, like I said, wonderful. But that's something that, like dry canning was never even talked about back in the day. You basically boiled your water on a stove and you poured it in you blanched your food, you blanched your potatoes, and by the time you got through, if you wanted to can potatoes, they would be good for mashing, and that's about it. There would be nothing else to the potatoes except it would be a bunch of, when you got them out of the can, be crumbly. So this dry canning just basically gives you a new way of looking at potatoes and some other foods. You can do a lot of things by dry canning. So that's just basically something that's what they call Rebel Canning. And it's just people that have come up with different ways of doing it, testing it, and just plain old people like me, you, or whoever that have looked at the food supply and decided, you know, read the writing on the wall maybe 10 years ago and decided, hey, we're going to have a problem. So anyway, they have come up with these different ideas, so I would like to share some of the different ideas with you too. So one of the things is that why do we want to preserve food? Why do you want to do that? Because we go down to the store. There may be a little supply chain issue, but it's not bad. We still got food. I've gone to Walmart and there's been food all over the place. Well, back in the Bible, they always talked about, you know, preserving food. Even back in the day when you talked about like Joseph installed grain silos in every city due to his interpretation of Pharaoh's dream of famine. And it basically saved him and his family. And then he was able to actually feed all of Egypt like that. And that's just one biblical example. But it's wise. In Proverbs 21:20, it calls out those who are wise, who store up food and olive oil, and points out that fools gulp theirs down. Just gulp, gulp. Healthy. Since you do it, you know exactly what's in it. So, quick meal prep. You can dump one or two of these in, you know, in a skillet or do whatever you want to do, and you've got a meal just like that. So instead of trying to fry all your hamburger or anything like that, say for instance you want to fix some tacos. So basically what you do is you get your hamburger meat out from your jar, you dump it in a skillet and you put your seasoning in there, stir that up, do your vegetables, and you have tacos. Just like that. And if people come around that, you know, visitors or whatever that you want to see, you know, like you have a neighbor to come by or whatever. Some of us still do have some friends that come by, but usually people don't. But I think it's going to get more and more as time passes that people see that Facebook's not the thing to get on, that it's better to have a face-to-face visit with your neighbors. And also to be more food independent. I've already talked about this just a minute ago, but basically, most merchants today use a just-in-time inventory method. It's made popular by Toyota in World War II, and it was found that if parts were not kept in the stock room but ordered only when needed, it increased a company's liquidity and efficiency. Today, grocers and big box stores just order enough to replenish what you see on the shelves, resulting in a large variety, but not much else. That's it. You got a lot of variety, not depth. The modern day grocery stockroom is constantly on the move in the back of a truck, and the old stockroom is being converted to a receiving area where a truck comes in. Since this method relies on trucks, and trucks rely on gas, remember the gas, and many food items come from another state or country, you can see how this well-oiled chain could break. Never mind inflation and food shortages. All right, this is a warning. Don't cast your pearls among the swine. Don't expect unbelievers or even unenlightened Christians to think you're wise if you share that you're preserving food. You may be labeled a hoarder, a prepper, or some may comment, if anything happens, I know where I'm coming to if something happens. So, listen to that still, quiet voice. Ask the Lord. Share the knowledge of what you're doing if you feel led to, and keep quiet if you don't. Some of what I'm telling you is not USDA approved. That's what I talked about just a minute ago. But my great-grandmother canned meat and everything else. Of course, not USDA approved recipes. But she canned it with a water bath canner and successfully raised 13 healthy children. One passed away, but it was just because that one got in a well and drowned. Most folks in the United Kingdom still water bath their foods. And the reason why they do, from what that I understand that I have read, is that either the canners are very expensive, or even they're outlawed in some areas, and I don't know why. That's what some people have said. Or it's just basically too expensive to get the canner shipped there. So first we're going to talk about the jars. Not cans, but jars. Somebody pointed out, and it's so true, we call this canning, but we don't use cans, we use jars. That is a really good point. Don't know why, but I think that back in the day, my new friend pointed out that in World War II, they also canned, which that's true. They used the tin cans. They actually put the food in and then put on the lids and did the pressure like that. Don't know how it worked, but I know we don't do that anymore. So these jars here can be used for all sorts of things. They can use for general food storage. On the jar, you're going to see like mason. Like most jars have mason, but this one doesn't, but it says that it's ball. So when I bought the case, which they come in like a case of 12, you can get them like $10 or so at Walmart. Basically, it says on the package mason jar. So this is not really, it's a mason jar, but it's a ball jar. They make different kinds, but this just happens to be ball. It's a brand. But mason is that they're a little thicker and they withstand high temperature of the pressure canning. And it was invented, actually this jar like this was invented by a guy named Mason, and it also means that it has a screw top just like this. This is, all your mason jars generally have screw tops. So if you want to buy new or used, you can do that. And I also know that if you see some used jars and they look cloudy, and they say, oh man, I can't use those jars, those are cloudy, something's wrong with them. There's not anything wrong with them. It's our hard water that has caused them to be cloudy. So don't be afraid of them. This is the only thing you need to look at when you're looking at a jar. You feel that? You can't feel it, but I'm feeling it for you. It's smooth. That means that there's no cracks or nicks in the lid here, right here on the rim. Also, I'm looking at the jar and I see a seam and another seam, but I don't see any cracks. So visually inspect them. Don't be afraid of anything that's not marked, like ball or whatever. Even though that they say that the other jars, like old mayonnaise jars, you've seen people can in old mayonnaise jars or heard about it, don't be afraid of that. Because those jars, they say, and I'm not for sure if it's a marketing thing or if it's really true, but it's not mine to judge that. I just know that I've canned in what's mayonnaise jars and some things just off the shelf. As long as they've got a lid that I can fit the lid on there, don't be afraid of it. Get that thing and can in it. And one thing is that I don't have any right now, but their Classico makes an Atlas jar that they put their marinara in. So if you see marinara, different kinds of jars, try to look, when you're looking for a jar, instead of like looking for marinara or spaghetti sauce, look for something that actually has like a screw lid on it. I know Classico, like you'll see it and it'll say Atlas on here and it'll say Mason. But I'm not for sure if it's a market. They said it was only a marketing thing, that it really was not a mason jar, but I'm not for sure where I believe it, because I have canned in those things and they do fine. Instead of, this is a pint, they make quarts, of course, but the Classico jars are a pint and a half, so they're a little bit bigger than this and actually make good size if you want to, stand something up or have a little bit more. It doesn't make any difference. You can can in them. And the canning times would be the same as the pints. Quart and up is quart time, like quart and, wait a minute. Pint, sorry about that. I've got it written here, so when you get the paper and everything, you'll see exactly what it is. So, but anything pint and under are pint times. Jelly jars are the same thing as a pint, okay? Now, if you get anything above a pint, it will be the same thing as a quart. So that pint and a half, you time it the same thing as a quart jar. So basically, when you start breaking it down like that, it's a whole lot simpler than what you thought. So, breakage in the jar. Breakage. Oh my goodness. Sometimes even a new jar or a repurposed jar or whatever will crack and break, chip. Just it's not the end of the world when that happens, by the way, not a big deal. It just may hurt your feelings like it did mine when I had a special jar that I really liked that says 1776, 1976, and was a bicentennial jar. Now, I have to say that hurt my feelings. But I thought, well, the way my granddaddy said, it could be wussa. So at least it was just a jar and not my head or anything like that. The canner wasn't broken. It was a survivable situation, although sad for a second or two. So if that happens in the canner, you may not even know it. You may hear some rattling, or it may sound just a little bit different. You'll say, what is that? And all it is, if it's pressure canned and you hear that, and you look inside when it gets through, go ahead and process it as usual. Sometimes the jars, because they need to fit tight in the canner. So if that one jar is broken and laying down or whatever, and it's not, you may have another one laying down. If the seal is good, I would not worry about it because it's still safely pressure canned. The only thing you need to worry about it if you get a jar out and it's laying down like that, it's not the best thing that ever was, and the reason why is because you can have seepage, or you can actually have some food that it will actually seep out and under the lid and the rim of the jar, and it will cause a failed seal. Also, when you get that, you look in there and you see that broke can, you just make sure that you get you probably some gloves, get you some good heavy rubber gloves or some kind of something, and pick what you can out. But the main thing is pick the good jars out and go ahead and try to set them out best that you can and set them on a good towel. Then what you need to do is like have a colander or some kind of something like that. Metal is better. Just go ahead and pour that canner water, the whole bunch of broke stuff in there in that colander, and then dump everything in the trash. But the colander will go ahead and strain the glass out. And then just go ahead and rinse your canner out and do as normal. But if it were me, I'd probably take it outside and rinse it, because that little slivers of glass are not fun. All right, wide mouth or regular mouth jars? Which do you like? This is a regular mouth jar. Now, your wide mouth jars are just like this, and I've brought pints because that's mostly, I'm just canning pints. But this is a wide mouth jar, this is a regular jar. Now when you set them down, you'll see that the regular jar is just a little bit taller than the wide mouth. So if you decide to put these in the canner and mix them up, just make sure, don't get all tore up about it. Just make sure here, like this is a short one, here's a tall one, here's a tall one, here's a tall one, and just go ahead and intermingle it where they will sit down and be level in your canner. Now, if you're going to be doing the wide, just do what you think, really. But what I do is I go ahead and put like things with liquid in here in the regular mouth jars, and things like this is, went ahead and put hamburger in here. But the thing is about putting it in this size jar right here, it may be hard to shake out. So it's really easier to can in a wide mouth jar as far as like your meat and things like that. And anything like, for instance, now this is crazy, who would have thunk it, but this is meatloaf. So I've actually canned meatloaf in here, and I'll tell you about how to do that a little bit later. But the thing is about meatloaf, you just shake it out. And what you do is you can slice it off so you can still have slices, see? So that's the reason why that the different kinds of jars. Use your judgment and decide what you want to do. It's not going to hurt anything to can hamburger in here, but I'm just saying it's a little easier. But use what you have. Use what you have. Has anybody got any questions so far? All right, this is just basically like some common sense things, I guess, that I'm just laying on. This is for like the beginning canners that you haven't canned, just kind of giving a good overview. Cleaning the jars. Dishwasher is great. That's the best thing that ever was invented. Put those cans in that dishwasher and push that button, put your little thing in there or whatever, your detergent, bam, it's clean. So, but that hamburger one right there, it's going to have stuff inside that you're going to go, what is that? And you can't maybe get it out because sometimes food does stick, especially thick food. So go ahead and you can take vinegar. Vinegar is a miracle as far as like cutting through the grease and things like that, and through any kind of hard anything is really good. Or let the jar just plain old soak, scrub it with a scrubby. It works out. You can clean your jars easy. A bottle brush is good for that. Storing your empty jars. What do you do with the empty jars in between? You got all these things that you've just canned and you're emptying them out, and what are you going to do with all those empty jars? Well, the best way to do it is when you empty those jars out, wash those jars good and clean. Make sure you visually inspect there's no food or anything in there in the jars. And you go ahead and put your new rings on, lid and rings. Go ahead and put them on the jars, and then you can go ahead and store them. That way when you get ready to use them again, because the funny thing is about sales, I may run across a sale tomorrow and I want to put this stuff in some jars. So I do not want to wash these jars and see about this, that, or the other. They're ready to go basically. If it's your pressure can, and if you're water bath, then you'll need to go ahead and sterilize them a little bit. And, and it's just a lot easier to do it like that. Do things as you go along, let's see. The best thing to do also is, of course, storing the jars. It's best to store them empty. Make sure you have this on. And the reason why, too, is because that, like rattling them around or whatever, you can nick the lid. And then once you nick the lid, then you won't have a good seal. It'll only be good for, storing your ink pens in, standing up. So the best thing to do is the boxes that they came in, go ahead and store them in those as long as the boxes last. When the end of the life is reached on the boxes, I like milk crates. You can buy those. You can buy totes. You can put them in totes. But I like to have things where like the milk crates is a smaller box. You can stack them in there, and you can move them really easy and stack them on top of each other. So it's really an easy way to do that is milk crates. Or just plain boxes. If you don't have anything but boxes, store them in boxes. Use what you have. All right, storing the full jars. What do you do with all these? What am I going to do with all those? How do I store them? Now you notice all these right here. Where's the ring? The ring is off. You make sure you store the jars with the ring off, because what will happen is this cute little thing called pressure. So it warms up, the pressure increases, the lid goes down, it looks like it's sealed. You go, oh yeah, those are sealed, everything's good. And then you'll get to sniffing something. It's like, what is this? It smells like kind of like pinto beans, but not really. I'm not for sure what that is. So what will have happened is if that you store it like this, that thing, the lid will go up and down, and what that means is you did not have a good seal. But the reason why that it's still sealed is because this lid is on. So if that you smell your jars or whatever, you smell something, you may not be able to find it right then, but you will eventually find that jar that stinks. I don't mean that in a bad way, but you know what I mean. All right, this also, if that you leave it like this, then when that jar does, it'll, like I said, a bad seal, it may come out and look like it's good in the canner, but how to tell? You hear that? You hear those little keen taps? If you can't hear it, it's just... Now, what is that? Something's wrong, isn't it? That one sounds okay. It's blackberry jelly. But guess what? I've got a can of Splenda strawberry jam that I did like 2 days ago, and it's just like this. But it looks like it's sealed when you look at it. But that's one of the best ways to tell if your product is sealed or not. It's just, especially, you can go, you'll get where you can do that and just check it out real quick to see if it's sealed or not. It's pretty cool, actually. Yes? Now that is a really good question.
Dee, could you ask that again?
Yes, Kim, what temperature do you store your canned goods?
The main thing is to keep your canned goods from freezing or getting too hot. If it's cold enough to freeze, it's time to move them into the house or whatever, do something, or put if you store them outside, you can store these things outside or wherever. But what you need to remember is that if it gets too cold, it's like anything else, they'll freeze and the jar will crack, or it will bust open and you've just got a frozen blob of potatoes, say for instance. If it gets too hot, then the next thing you know is you've got a product that's not going to last as long. It will degrade the vitamins, minerals, things like that. It will degrade the product, so when you take it out, it may not be as good for whatever reason. But the deal is if anything were to happen one of these days, and you hope nothing ever does, that the Lord just poofs us away or whatever, but even if that happens, then you're basically, all of your canned goods and things like that, you hope that somebody else will be able to use them. So if that your regular, what I did is I went ahead and I had a back room that I kept all of my canning goods in, but it was not central heat or air. Well, it was getting too hot and too cold. So what I ended up doing was just running a duct to a room where that it would give it enough heat or enough air. But like I said, it's really variable. It's not going to kill anything, you know, like in other words, it shouldn't spoil the food or anything like that. It just will degrade it. If you put it in sunlight, for instance, those green beans may turn, instead of like green beany color, they'll be light green or some kind of off color, and that's what it'll also do. Does that answer you? So, and that's what was next. Not too hot, not freezing. All right. Also something that I didn't say, best not in the sun, and sun will discolor and degrade the food, make it too hot. Best not damp, as the lids will rust. These are best practices only. And like I said, you do what you can do to get your food stored. And if some of it ruins in the process, you hate it, and I'm so sorry and so sad, and I'll be crying. But at least not all of it will ruin, is what my point is. Generally, not all of the food will ruin, not all of it will freeze, not all of it will turn, discolor. Some may, but it shouldn't hurt it. If the lid's rust, and this is important, a lot of these things, the rings will rust. So if you have a ring and it's rusted, it may not go on good. It will grind. You'll be able to look at it visually and tell that it's rusted inside. If you do a lot of canning, whether it's water bath or pressure canning, the rings probably will rust if you put vinegar in, which most people recommend that you do a dollop of vinegar in your canner to keep the jars from turning cloudy. Some people don't, but what it does, if you have really hard water, then it will be a benefit to put the vinegar in there, but it also will cause rust, unfortunately. So, as long as you don't have rust inside, which is inside the lid, you see this is like just a regular cream color. Visually inspect these when you take them off if you want to, but when you put them on, visually inspect to make sure that it hasn't got if it's got a scrape or something like that, it may be going to rust or whatever. It shouldn't hurt, but it's one of those things you think about it. What is this? I'm not for sure what kind of metal that is. Probably aluminum, maybe. But anyway, that's kind of that. This is a coating in here, will protect the food, where that it's not going to give you any kind of seepage of harmful anything, and that's what that coating is for. All right, just in case you're going to store it in a place that has some light, like a window or something like that, just put you a quilt or some kind of something over there if you can't, or just, draw your shades or whatever that you need to do to make sure it's not in direct light. Also, if you're storing them on a cloth, like in some kind of shelving unit in your garage, and you have a lot of light in there or whatever, just simply put a quilt over the whole thing. The shelves and everything, that works. Shelving, speaking of shelving, heavy-duty shelving needs to be used so that it won't tip. There's nothing any more heartbreaking than coming in and seeing every one of your cans in the floor broken. So think about that when you're storing your food. You can, shelves, like a lot of them, make sure they're not swagging in the middle. Some of the wood is really, really light or whatever these days, so make sure what kind of shelves you get. I got just a set of shelves like at Home Depot, and it was some kind of mechanic shelves or something, and I looked on there and it said it would hold every 300 pounds or some kind of something. Also, go ahead and bolt or attach the shelves to the wall. Then that way you don't have to worry about them tipping over. So, innovative storage. I don't have a lot of money to buy a bunch of shelves. What am I going to do? You can store them in a chest, under the bed, crates in the closet, crates stacked along the walls in a bedroom somewhere. Just make sure they're stable. And remember, those crates, they're really, if you get some sturdy crates, they're not going anywhere, and they're really sturdy because a lot of them are like really milk crates. So if that, it's best not to stack the jars, but maybe too high, because it's just not good. You know, they say not good. But again, if you find yourself and you need to stack your jars, stack them as high as that you need to. Just make sure that they're stable and they're not going to tip over and break. Also, it was an interesting thing. I saw someone that had cut out some sheetrocks between the studs of the wall. It's really neat, y'all. They cut out the sheetrock, pushed that sheetrock back in there where the back of the quote-unquote shelf has sheetrock in the back, and then they went ahead and trimmed on the outside of that. So basically, they built shelves in. So what that does is just had all those shelves in the back, and it was recessed. So you had a place to store all of your food that was recessed, and that was really a neat thing. So if you want to look for that, what you need to do is look for build shelves between studs, and it'll come up on a Google search how to do that. FIFO. That's one of those weird terms that you're going to know when I tell you. First in, first out. Stack your jars with the newest cans to the back, and this is just a common sense thing. Use the oldest in the front. It's sometimes hard to do your shelves back to the wall when that happens, and however, if you're canning in bulks, it works to have the same date or same year in a single row or in a box, so you know what date it is. Maybe a lot of people stack by all squash right here, but what I do is I can different products and have them in like a box, and so it may be this, that, or the other, so I'll just go out and look to see what it is. Now, that is like not good if you're needing hamburger, because sometimes it's hard to find hamburger. So just use your own judgment and your common sense about how you do things. Labeling. You notice these right here this is my label. Very inexpensive Sharpie marker. Seasoned hamburger, 6/21. So that way I know what day it was canned and what it is, just right straight up there on the lid. The neat thing about doing it with a Sharpie, you wouldn't think so, but a little bit of olive oil or olive oil or alcohol will get this off. Plus, the funniest thing that I found that gets that off that you wouldn't think, it's just another Sharpie marker. So you just basically write over that with another Sharpie, and it releases that writing so you can go right on if you want to can or use this lid again for some other kind of storage, okay? It's just kind of neat. All right, now that's also good if you're canning like your regular food storage. It's also good to just write when you bring things in. Quit looking for the expiration date. You'll drive yourself crazy because the expiration date is in some obscure place, and it may be written in code. So basically what you do, if I was to go buy some food today, I'd put 6/22 on every one of the cans on the top where I know when it is, and just use what you get. Like, in other words, you'll know when you bought it, so that's close enough, because even commercial canned foods last a lot longer than what's on the shelf as far as shelf storage. How long does food last? Food stored in the jars eventually lose their flavor, nutritional value, and even some color, but it may take years and years. Seeds in tomatoes will eventually turn black, but it doesn't mean they're not good. They just are not pretty. Pinto sometimes have black on the inside of the lid. When you open them up, there'll be some black or some kind of weird stuff, and I've only noticed it in pinto beans. But that's chemical reaction with the lid. Don't know why. It doesn't happen all the time, but other people have had it, just not me. So they're good. Go ahead and just put them in your pan and eat them. As long as the lid is sealed, we talked about it. As long as the lid's sealed and there's no mold, only happens, mold usually happens when the seal is broken. It should be good. But the thing is, always, even with your canned goods you buy at the store, I can see it right here, so I look at my product through the glass. I'll lift it up and I'll look in, and this is important like even in canned foods. Look in, sniff. You know, you've heard the sniff test on bologna. It's the same thing with food. You should always be doing the same thing because you never know how somebody canned something or how it went at what somebody put in it, maybe by accident in the food process or commercially. And it's good enough for your stuff too, so just be looking, sniffing. One of the things is that what I have heard is that some people say to always boil the contents of the food for about 10 minutes before eating. Some others say it's totally safe to eat right out of the jar. But what I have heard and what I have found is that I go ahead and just eat it straight out of the jar sometimes, and you know that it's not any kind of problem. You know, you've always heard the word botulism, but we'll talk about that a little bit more a little later. But if you feel funny about your food, if you don't like it the way that it looks or something is like off, if you feel bad about it, throw it out. If it's a grid down survival situation, boil it for 10 minutes and you should be fine. All right, now one of the things is that preserves, this is an important thing too. When you start making preserves, sometimes, one thing about it, if you have high sugar content, sugar preserves the preserves. So basically, if you have any kind of problem or anything, you may have a little bit, you know, the lid, I'm concerned about this because this is Splenda. But if this happened on this jar, which is blackberry jelly, which has like lots of sugar in it, I would not be worried a bit. Now, sometimes you may pop the lid on a jar of jams or preserves. You may see a little bit of white something in there. That is not anything to be worried about. Grandmamas for years and years and years just took a spoon, took that white thing out, did it out. So it may be just a little bit of mildew or something like that, but it is not harmful to you. I'm just saying, and this is what I have read. I've not plucked any of that out of my jam, but I'm just saying, just in case you see that, that's what's been said. And this is lids and rings. Some of the new jars come, like if you buy ball jars straight off the shelf, they come with the lids and rings, no problem. Some of the jars, you go to the Amish or whatever, or the dollar store, they may have jars, but there's no lids or rings. So basically, you're going to have to, what do I do about that? So they're recommended for one-time use. I recommend picking up a box of new lids every time you go to Walmart or somewhere. Just pick up a box of lids. They're not but $3 and something, and stick them back, because if you don't need them, somebody else will at some point in time. So now, reusing the lids for canning. This is like one of those, like, am I going to do it or am I not? This is like I've always heard you never do this. Well, if you don't have lids, or even if you lived in the United Kingdom, they reuse their lids. Now, the deal is about reusing the lids is you need, if you were going to do this, and I'm not telling anybody to do an unauthorized, unapproved practice that's highly condemned by the USDA, I'm telling you that if I were going to reuse a lid, I would go ahead and simmer the lid to soften up this rubber here. And then I would go ahead and can it as usual. I'd go ahead and put it on whatever it was, but I wouldn't put it on my hamburger or whatever if I could do better. I would only probably reuse lids if there was some type of grid down situation for canning I'm talking about. I would only use that as if I couldn't do any better and I had all these lids. There are a lot of people that say that they have used these things 5 times or more, which that's unreal. But I can actually see that happening. As long as the rubber on it, you can see the rubber and everything looks good. When you simmer the lids, it will soften this rubber up and allow it to go ahead and make a good seal. So I'm just saying, just in case something happened and you didn't have lids some way or other. But these days, I probably would not. I've done it, and I've had, it's been some success and some not, unsuccessful. So it's just up to you. But it'd be interesting to just try it just once or twice, see how it does. Your kitchen, your rules. All right. And it goes again. I can't stress it enough. If they're rusted or scratched down to the metal, don't use it. Don't use it. But if you don't use it for canning or whatever, or if you're not going to save them, then what you do is you go ahead and just, you can use these for dehydrating or anything like that. Dehydrated goods, just right straight in a can. You can use it for storage or anything. And I've already talked about how do you know the lids are sealed. But once you take the jars out of the canner, once they're cool, take the band and lift the jar with your fingers. And this is another way of telling. See what I'm doing right here? I am actually able to lift that jar off with all that hamburger in it and it not fall down on the floor. So it's a pretty good indication that it's sealed. However, we're going into this territory again where that sometimes they do funny things, so I like to do that just to check. If that you see, and I don't know whether I've got lug lids. You're going to know what I'm talking about just as soon as I show you one. You see that? Lug lids are a one piece contraption here that actually comes on pickles and things like that and just different things. Believe it or not, I bought a thing of moonshine, and this is not like a crate of moonshine jars. I did not drink the moonshine, I'm just saying, but it was a whole crate I found at the flea market, and I couldn't resist. They were pint and a halves, and it said Mason on it, and they came with all these right here. I have not canned as far as like water bath canning, but people in the United Kingdom, a lot of them, this is what they use because they can't find these for whatever reason. I just know we're blessed in the United States to be able to have canning supplies and be able to, even though there's shortages from time to time, we're able to find what we need. But these can also be used, even though that it's not recommended to pressure can. I've heard you can, don't know for sure, but I do know that people water bath can in these because that's what they talk about in the United Kingdom all the time. And these can be used because if you'll look on these lug lids, there's enough rubber on there for 3 of these regular ones right here. Really thick. And you can feel when you put them on how they grab the glass. All right. And another thing too, a lot of the lug lids will have a button and you can tell right off if it's canned or not. Used to, Ball and all the Cares and all the other ones used to have like a button right here, and they could tell this was a safety button on the old jars. This safety button, not anymore. This is what you're going to find right here. It's just a regular, most of the time, lid. The only way you're going to be able to tell a button, if there's a button, because there kind of sort of is, but you got to kind of turn it to the side and look at it just right, and you can kind of see in it where that it goes up. But you can't really see it, but it's there. Tadler and Harvest Guard lids. I don't know if y'all know about this, but this is relatively new on the market. When people were having so much trouble with their finding these type of lids, these people that made these Tadler lids started just going all out, and everybody wanted Tadler lids. Well, Tadler started making the lids in their 2 parts, just kind of like your bale jars. You remember looking at those? And how they work is that this is not glass like the old-timey jars. This is like some kind of composite, but it's actually like BHA safe. I don't know if I'm using that word right or not, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It's safe, not supposed to be any kind of harmful chemicals in it. You just put the lid on. Just put that lid on, and then you can go ahead, and I can't believe I didn't bring a wide mouth jar. But anyway, you just put it on. Well, oh, I do have a wide mouth. Look here, y'all. So, say for instance, this had your food product in it. You go ahead and you put the rubber piece down, and it's very thin rubber, but you put the rubber piece down, and then you put it on the jar. And then you just put the lid on. Now, there's a difference. This Tadler jar can be reused, the rubber part, so it's basically in two parts. You can buy more rubber to go with the lid, and you can have it like how you tell, it's just like any other piece of rubber. You see how tight that fits? When it gets to the point where it's loose and like wobbly and out over everything, then you know it's not good anymore. A lot of times you can go ahead and boil it. It will go ahead, like simmer it, I should say, not boil, but simmer it, and it will go ahead and it should go ahead and shrink back up to be able to be used instead of, being all laid out to the side. But they're really neat. Now, one of the neater things is that I watched Red Rose Homestead, and I love to watch, and the Homestead Heart too, and on YouTube channels. And they're really, really good. But Red Rose Homestead, she's one of these ladies that you can tell she talks way above my head on a lot of levels sometimes. But she is very intelligent, and she's looks at canning through a scientific manner. Matter of fact, she's probably better than the USDA. She said, and a lot of people didn't want to hear it because that, hey, Ball was very sad, I'm sure, when they heard that you can, and Tadler was too, when she said that you could take this, put it on here. So, keep those jars, y'all. Keep these lids, these used lids, and then just in case, but she said you could do that, and I can see every reason why to do that, because you see it just goes right straight on there. Now, there's a little issue that you need to know about the Tadlers. Tadler, there was like a family that ran the Tadler business, and they really got where they were doing good. Well, evidently some people had some problems in the family, like some families do sometimes. And one brother went this way, and one brother stayed with the Tadler company. So there's now a product called Harvest Guard, same exact design, same everything. Some people say that Tadler is better, or Harvest Guard is better than Tadler, but I don't believe it. But I couldn't find Harvest Guard, so I bought Tadler. But anyway, when you put it on, you go ahead, do it just like you regularly would. Finger tight, y'all. If you want to know what finger tight is, you don't use your wrist. And what I do is the bird ring finger and thumb. This is all I use right there, that I know it's finger tight and not cranked down. You crank things down, it's too tight, you got a problem. So, finger tight. You put that thing in the canner, pressure canner or water bath, it will come out. This is the only time you ever do this. Do not do it with your regular jars. But when they come out, tighten them again. So the deal is if you don't tighten them again, it will not seal. So you have to tighten them once they come out of the canner. These regular jars, you better not be tightening them. Again, you'll lose your seal. So basically, when they come out of the canner, my finger tightens sometimes does this. You'll look and you'll go, oh my goodness, that can't work. But yeah, it already did its job in the canner. It's just waiting now to go ahead and cool down. It's already sealed and just waiting on the temperature to come down, but it's already sealing. So you may find them when you get them out of the canner, may be loose. Never fear. The only time you ever tighten anything down, like coming out of the canner, is just that tattler, okay? Yes. Yes.
I've done a little bit of canning, and I notice when the cans start to cool that you hear a pop. And my mom used to always say, you know it's sealed. Is that still right?
I don't know what the deal is anymore, but a lot of times I will hear the pop. Sometimes the jars don't pop, don't know why. And like I said, I think it's due to this button. You know, some of them are made better than others. These days, a lot of our canned supplies are made no telling where. We hope in the United States, but I'm afraid that some things are made like out of the country, and the quality may not be as good as others. So I don't know, but this is what you're hoping to hear, because you can hear it like it is a big loud pop. But like I said, some of them don't, and especially like water bath, I don't. Sometimes I don't hear them. Could be because my age and my hearing is not as good now. I'm not saying anything about that, but you know what I'm saying right there. All right. I've got the links to the Tadler and the Harvest Guard, and also Lehman's is a good place. If you haven't seen Lehman's, they've got a lot of homesteading equipment and supplies, and they are wonderful.